Igueris miracula.
You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith. Pax et bonum, peace and good to you all. You are listening to Aim Higher podcast with Father Anthony and Sister Catherine. Today, we're going to delve into a topic that, well, we did for me, questions for a priest. Now we're going to do questions for a sister. And this is basically an interview. I am the interviewer. Sister is the interviewee. Hello, say hi, sister.
Hi, sister.
I don't know, interviewee. I think that's the term.
It just sounded very weird.
It does sound. It sounded. I don't know what.
Weird.
You're right. It's
Yeah.
just interviewee. I think that's the word. I think that's a word. People can they can text or put a little comment on YouTube, or they can
Email us at aimhigher.podcast.
email us and says yes, Father. That is an actual word. Or Father, you're making up stuff. But I believe actually is a term. Don't care enough to look it up, but this is what we're doing today. A little bit more of a lighthearted, fun topic. I think all of our topics are lighthearted and fun, and I hope that they're inspiring. We try to stay away from too much really heavy topics because that's not what Aim Higher is about. By dealing with topics of like sex trafficking or things of that nature. You want to listen to that and go to Father Joseph, his webpage, catholichour.org. And he might have that up already, the episode that we did, Sister and I did on sex trafficking. But, it's not what we delve into here.
Yeah.
So, as the intro says, it's a Catholic podcast. Wait, what do I say? Help to encourage the daily practice of our faith. I see. It's like
shows how often you listen.
I'm the one who did it.
Yep.
To encourage, is designed for the daily encouragement of our
daily practice of our faith, but I think it's designed to encourage.
I said something else.
But then I'm sorry, is it designed to encourage? But then it's like, or is that the Catholic Faith Radio program? I don't know.
No. That's something Boy, this is embarrassing. This is really embarrassing. You think I would know this off the top of my head? Says you're listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to encourage the daily practice of our faith.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
Close enough.
Yeah. Because Father Joseph has to
to instruct and right.
Yeah. Because I was doing I was had to host his radio show for 2 weeks, so we were having a bit of fun with it, and we were saying that I think it'd be great if I came on, did my Morgan Freeman impression, and did the intro, for the cat. Like, this is the Catholic Faith Radio program, hosted by Father Joseph Noonan, OFM, Franciscan friar of the strict observance, and pastor of Corpus Christi Roman Catholic Church in Lubbock, Texas. And I would have had a lot of fun with that. I don't know if Father Joseph would have, but yeah. So I kind of remember the whole intro to the Catholic. Problem is, I only remember it as Morgan Freeman. So I can only do it, as Morgan Freeman. But that's not what we're here for, is it? We're here for an interview.
Yes.
Anyway.
And not with Morgan Freeman. Sadly.
Sadly, he'd be a very interesting fellow to interview, I suppose, but not on being a religious sister.
Yeah,
So that'd be a little hard. I don't know what experience he has in that,
ask him what it's like to portray a principal in a rundown school.
Yeah.
Or a forensic psychologist, which what was like to play one of those characters.
Two movies, or a prison inmate who does a lot of monologues.
Right. But I don't think
I first met Sister Catherine.
Or what it was like to drive Miss Daisy.
Miss Daisy. Yeah, that's just before we get to the main topic, I have to say, Driving Miss Daisy is an enigma of a movie to me. And the reason why is that I was 8 years old when I first saw that movie, and I loved it at 8 years old. I don't know why. And it was one of those movies that would come on TV. I'd stop what I was doing, I'd sit and watch it. I'm a kid. And it's like, why do I like this movie? And I watched it a few years ago. I said, I know why I like this movie. It's just so well acted, and the story is really endearing for their relationship with each other. But I just didn't. I didn't understand the stuff when I was a kid.
No,
I didn't get it.
But I think it's interesting when you actually watch movies like that from a kid, and then you watch it again when you're a little bit older, and then a little even older, because we were just having that conversation. Well, we didn't really have a conversation about it. We alluded to a conversation about it with the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner that was made in the late 60s.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that movie when I was a teenager and liked it as a teenager, and just watching it, years later as an adult. I mean, there's certain movies I think that, you do need to revisit and you can learn from.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I recently watched that as well because Dad mentioned it. Said, well, let's watch it. And I just like, it's like, man, the girl in that movie just wanted to slap her the whole time. It's like she was enjoying making everyone feel uncomfortable, and she didn't care. She didn't care. She just had these smug looks on her face. She even admits it. She even admits it to Sidney Poitier. His character, but was like, she would have been upset if her parents didn't have that shock reaction. Like, is she sadistic? I don't know. But anyway,
we're not going to talk about that movie either.
They're not going to help us out by getting to the main topic here. No. And the main topic is Shawshank Redemption. Now, no, I'm kidding. Anyway,
interesting movie, but
anyway, heavy. And what did we just say? We don't do heavy.
No.
On Aim Higher.
No.
When we get on the Catholic Faith Radio program and cover for Father Joseph, well.
And if we do end up covering some heavy topics, we will make it very clear that it might be something you don't want to listen to with little ears.
Yeah, you don't want your kids to listen to.
Because it was something we had talked about a couple months ago, but it's something that we have to actually really plan. So
it is, because when you deal with something that any topic that is heavy, especially with families dealing with different aspects, not just of the faith, but how to apply the practice of the faith in real life situations. And there are a lot of real life situations that we deal with now that we didn't deal with 10, 15 years ago, even 20 years ago. We didn't deal with these things. So you have to kind of prepare people with that and then give them certain examples. So these aren't things we want to get into, but we have to find the best way of approaching it. So it's actually helpful in the instruction. And that's actually it's something we take very seriously here on Aim Higher. We like to have fun when we do these podcasts. We want to make sure that the message is clear and you understand where we're coming from. And it's not a place of being overly stern, not looking to be lax. We're looking to find that middle ground in everything we do, because it is the middle path that is the right one. We don't want to be hot or cold. Well, we don't want to be lukewarm either. You don't want to be lukewarm either. That's the one time, I guess, being the middle doesn't help, because that's kind of the middle, and that's where God vomits you out of his mouth. So forget that analogy into this. But in any other way, you got to avoid the extremes. So today, it's a very happy topic. At least I hope in many aspects it'll be considered happy. I think Sister finds it happy. It'll be an interview with a sister. And if I had some fancy music to put in here right now, that would be playing. Da 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 da.
President McDonald's? You're loving it?
Wait a minute. Da da da. That was McDonald's, but I am loving it. Okay.
I was gonna say though, but I could probably splice something in
You
there.
probably could splice something in there, but now that we had this conversation, they will know.
Yeah. So.
Well, that doesn't ruin it. It's just if we were doing live. Yeah.
I think our regular listeners are a little used to us. So.
Ba, 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 ba. I'm loving it. Anyway, sister, now we're going to get to the serious part of today's episode and talking about entering religious life. Now, I'm sure, listeners, you understand what we mean by the religious life. There's a difference between a person being religious in how they act as they go out in the world, keeping God before their minds, practicing their faith, and doing it with courage and conviction within this world. Something different than a person who takes a further step, taking vows before God to embrace a life that is outside of the world and entering into what we call the religious state. And that's what we're referring to. Everyone is called to be religious to some degree in their life, in their vocation, whether you are married or single out in the world. But they are those called by God to we will call it a higher calling, a deeper spiritual life and understanding. And it's not for everyone, because it does take a certain amount of self-sacrifice and major adjustment in your life. Well, depending on the individual as well, and in their circumstances. But that's what we mean by religious life, that state that people enter into with those vows and promises made before Almighty God and His church. And I might want to add right here before we get to the questions that these vows are the same as though somebody were getting married. You can't just, if you make the final vow, as we call them, solemn vows in religious life, that's for life. It is like a marriage. You can't decide, I just don't want to do this anymore, and then walk away. I making vows as a priest, holy orders. I can't just one day decide, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to leave and go get married and have kids. No, it don't work like that. You've made promises before God, and you made them for the rest of your life. So this is one of the reasons.
And it's very clear leading up to making those promises, that vow. This isn't something that was just swept under the rug and it's just an element of surprise. Oh, guess what?
Oh,
it's
by
also
the way.
This. Right. This is very clear to find. And even for, I believe you, or at least not you specifically, but a priest who's a religious, I mean, you made those vows a couple of times.
Yeah, well, as a Franciscan, you take simple vows for 3 years, and then after those 3 years, if your superiors think this is your vocation, or if you don't have any objections to your vocation, then you take your solemn vows, and that's for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's reiterated so much, and we can also include entering the priesthood, because a young man does not take what we call a solemn vow until he reaches the subdiaconate. Up till then, all he receives is minor orders, which can be dissolved without any problem, without tarnishing a young man's reputation or his position in the church, or anything of that nature. And it's repeated constantly. And you are reminded of this. And the reason it's done so is because this is not a natural state to live in. It's not like getting married. It's a supernatural. Yes, exactly. It's spiritual. It's a higher state and requires a greater sacrifice. Getting married, of course, there is a sacrifice involved in having children. You're not living just for yourself. You're living for your spouse and for the children that you have. You're the two becoming one, and then the 3, the 4, the 5, how many kids you have, all becoming one family. And that requires sacrifice. It requires the love, putting others' needs before your own. In this religious life, it's really the same way. You're putting God before yourself in a more personal manner. And whatever it is that you may have been inspired to do in the world, we're not talking about things that are necessarily evil. I'm just thinking of anything, any sort of path, worldly path. You put that all aside, and you say, what does God want? And that's what it comes down to so much, is what is God's will for me? And when God makes it clear He's calling you to this state, He will give you the grace to answer the call. You have to be willing to cooperate with it. But before I get into all that, I'm sure we're going to touch more deeper into that at some point, or maybe not. We'll just see where the conversation goes. But we will begin with the questions. Question number 1. What is your name?
Sister Catherine.
Very good.
Did I get it right?
You got it right. Wait, is that spelled with a K or a C?
C.
Okay, then you got it right. Okay. Sister Catherine. When did you enter into the religious life?
All right. Well, I moved to Rochester, New York, in October of 2015, and I began my postulancy, which is a 6-month period of just getting acclimated to the environment, the house, the religious house, taking part in prayer times, mass, and then the schedule, the routine of the religious house, which involves, time for cleaning, time for other projects, just like that. So I spent 6 months in that period, and then after 6 months, April of 2016, I was invested in the habit of the Third Order Regular. I was given the name Catherine after Catherine of Bologna, which was, not really a surprise. I mean, the bishop kept the name choice, as you do, a secret until the day of the reveal. But I had a hunch that was one of the names, and partly because a book I had been reading prior to coming to New York was a book which the bishop and I are kind of using as our outline for our Virtue of the Month series, but it's a Year of the Saints. And there was a quote about obedience from St. Catherine of Bologna, who I'm named after. And I just really resonated with that quote. In fact, I'll just read it for funsies.
Why not?
So the quote is, "Without a doubt, obedience is more meritorious than any other penance. And what greater penance can there be than keeping one's will continually submissive and obedient?" And I'll tell you that quote comes in handy because you really can't go wrong just doing what you're asked. There is definitely room for, how do I put this? Like, you know what is expected, and then there's something, obedience isn't asking for permission for every little tidbit, there's things that you're just expected to do, but also if you're ever unclear about a situation, you go to your superior, do whatever they tell you, and you're okay. It's really quite nice. So I was very grateful that I had read this book prior to coming, because it really did help me just kind of embrace each stage I was in my journey of a religious sister. Because when I came here, there weren't any other sisters. We had a girls' school. There was a house mother, and the bishop was, teaching the 2 girls in school. So, and I helped out with that. Definitely not the ideal situation, and I knew that coming in. But I knew that all I had to do was just trust the bishop and do what he told me, and whoever he put in charge of me, and I could do no wrong. Well, I mean, I made mistakes, but
Oh.
but you know what I mean. It's just like
Yes.
what could possibly be difficult in that. I mean, it depends on how strong-willed you are. The more you're willing to just be flexible, set aside what you think is right.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't encounter a lot of stuff like that, but it definitely, I've grown a lot. So.
Well, flexibility is a very important trait to have entering to religious life, especially religious life, because you are entering into really unknown territory. I mean, did you have any sort of exposure before you went out there?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, not clear cut. I mean, we were fortunate enough to have a Dominican sister as a teacher in our earlier years. And I mean, I remember I had her by myself for my first year of school, which was really great. That was like the best year of school I ever had. You almost would have thought I would have been a genius because I could spell incomprehensible when I was like 4 years old.
Really? That's inconceivable.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that one, the I before E and all that jazz. Just it's hard for me. So that was my peak year of school, was first grade. I might have been 5, but
I
anyway,
hear you. I was great up to the 4th grade.
Spending time with her, I remember wanting to live with her, but I really think that had more to do with getting away from my brothers than anything else. So
wow.
I know.
Soon, huh?
So shocking.
We're already getting under your skin? Only that early, huh?
I think that was more when I was about 10. So.
Okay.
But I would still say that seeing her did have some impact. But you just knew that sister had, she came, she obviously went to mass and she taught all day and she took care of like the flowers and the linens and she had her routine. And so I knew that there'd be a routine, but you also quickly learned that every day is different, which is a nice thing, which I think is a common concern for a lot of people. Like, oh, I would be so bored as religious. I won't have any freedom. And in a sense, yes, you don't have the freedom. I feel like I do have the freedom that people think I don't have.
Well, just to get up and go because you just feel like it.
Right. But how many people really have that freedom? Just do whatever they want. If you have a job, you're obedient to the job. You have to get up at a certain time because of your job. If you have children,
you want to keep it.
Yeah. If you have children, you can't just sleep in regardless of what your children are doing. Your children, kind of do dictate your schedule. So to say that I am being like a prisoner is really inaccurate. And I've often told people I do get to do what I want. I want to do God's will and I get to do it here. So it's just.
You can't get a better answer than that, sister.
Well, I'm divinely inspired for sure, because I've needed to say that, because you encounter some people that think it's, a travesty. I haven't lately, but in the beginning, how terrible for you, and have to wear that habit and what have you. But it just, that's a lack of true knowledge. So anyway, were you going to say something, Father?
Well, it's just when you mention the habit, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first habit you wore, wasn't that, oh no, it wasn't one that I used to wear. Was it?
No.
But
we had to make one because I was too tall for anything here. Okay. And that one still ended up being a little too short, but the best we could do, because that's the thing, there weren't any sisters or anyone. I had no sewing experience before I came here, so that was definitely a whole operation. I mean, we had to make a wimple or a veil, but we did take a pattern from you to make mine.
That's right.
Yeah, and then a couple years later, we were taking it in. Well, I mean, you have broader shoulders than I do, and that was part. Because the thing is, it's basically. It's not form fitted, but if you take from someone's shoulders and you sew down, and I'm not as broad shouldered as you, that's going to be a problem. So I yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
a lady that taught me how to sew dresses offered to take in my habit, so we put a seam up the back, and so we've been and that fit a lot better. And then I had to make a habit last summer, and we made it longer. I mean, it's hard because knowing that, like, oh, we need like 6 yards of wool to make sister a habit, that's long enough. But
Mhm.
I either am 6 feet or I'm 5'11". It's kind of up for grabs.
I think you're 5'12".
Well, that's why I tell people. I did when I went to the physician's office. I did say that. So,
Hope they got a chuckle.
yeah, a little chuckle. The humor. So anyway, where are we going with this? So I spent okay. So after I was invested, took the
Right.
name of Catherine, so Sister Catherine.
This is a Catherine.
I was
Yep.
given the habit, scapular, which we got the pattern of a scapular from a Jesuit priest that was in storage. So but that worked out well because it was long. As we were looking, I was like, well, that looked like that might fit you. And then there was a name tag. Oh, it's for a man. Of course. No wonder that's going to be long enough.
Was there anything different with your habit or your whole attire when you were in novitiate than you are when you took your vows?
There was something, yes. So as a novice, I wore a white veil for 2 years until I took temporary vows.
Do you know the significance to that, or is that just to differentiate?
I think there might be a better background. I wasn't prepared for this question. I probably could have answered this more fully at another time, but it is just to differentiate the stage of the progression of the religious life. We'll just go with that. If I think of what it was, it just I wasn't prepared. But I'll tell you, it was adjustment wearing the white veil and trying not to get it dirty. I still struggle with the wimple at times too, but the white veil was definitely. And I had 2 white veils, so you're limited, so you learn very quickly. I mean, we only have the one habit, so.
No, I know that certain religious orders for women, the custom of having a young woman as they're entering into beginning, I believe it's when they begin the novitiate, they're dressed in like basically a white wedding dress and having a veil and everything. Did you do anything like that?
Definitely not, thank God. It is actually a custom even within the Franciscan order because you're becoming a bride of Christ. So there's a significance to it, but I was very grateful that Bishop Giles was kind of like, not really for that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but let's also be realistic. To find something appropriate for me to wear would have been ridiculous to do and probably impossible. And for what? An hour. And it's not to say if we do get other young women someday, that we won't do that for them, because maybe some girl does have her mother's dress, or that. The thing is, I came into this a little on the old side. Old, really, really actually very old when you consider what the standard is. I think I might have even... What is
the standard?
18 to 30.
Okay.
And anything over 30... I mean, and 18 is really... Bishop Giles, for sure, is at least 18. I know that in some religious orders, years ago, you could have done younger, but in this day and age... At least be out of high school.
No.
But 30 is the cap. So I was already an exception because I was 33. So I was like a grandmother in religious life.
Very, very important year though, 33.
I did like that. I was like, yeah, I'm there's a quote from a movie that I don't care for, but the movie about Father Damien, I don't like that movie, but he does have a quote where he, before he goes on his mission in Hawaii to leper colony, he says, about our Lord.
You gave your life at 33, and I begin mine at 33.
Right. So I kind of felt like that was.
Yeah. You know what? We should do a review of that movie, maybe.
as long as I don't have to rewatch it, I can just go by because there's just some uncomfortable stuff in it, which I have.
There's some uncomfortable stuff in that movie. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on. But I wanted to ask that because, the age, there are always exceptions to a general rule, and obviously you were an exception to that rule, and that really is for us, the superiors, those who are involved in the candidates, reviewing their application, if you will, to take into consideration. And you're hoping to get those who come in younger because they're easier to form. And that's the reason for it, because not everybody can conform to the religious life at an older age.
And I feel like when you say like they're easier to form, I don't want anyone to take away, because it's so controlling, but it's a different lifestyle. And the older you are, the more set in your ways, the more strong-willed you are, and you need to let go of what you think is right, what you think is correct, right. Just like there's a difference between asking questions and questioning. So
yes, I learned that myself in religious life.
So I was considered old, but again, and you want younger people because there is a lot to do. And, now I'm 41, so, which is kind of crazy to believe, but it's true. So, but I didn't really have a hard time, adjusting. At least I don't think so. As far as wearing the habit, I actually was refreshing to me to not have to think about what to wear. You just put on the habit and you're good to go. And I get stopped a lot when I'm out. I haven't seen a sister in a full habit since such and such a time. I didn't know they still wear habits. And but it's usually positive. People's like they're so glad to see it. And if there's enough time and someone's sitting talking, they say they think that was part of the downfall is, like how can you, if a sister's dressed just, casual as can be, a polo shirt and a skirt, she just, it's not because I want people to think better of me, but just to know that I am doing something specific and there is, certain expectations, certain lines that you just automatically should not cross. There is, it's almost surreal to think that there is actually like certain levels of respect that are, I guess, due as a sister. But, we can have fun and poke jokes and stuff like that. But there is still something, and I just never had that in my life because, I was single, obviously, up until this point. But just so like you would respect a mother and father, you also have to show respect to a religious sister. So.
Well, exactly. And it reminds me of one time with Father Joseph when he was on a radio program. He agreed to do a few episodes with the Baptist minister in order to just, debate, apologetically. And that's not really what happened. The man took it as an opportunity to belittle and berate Father Joseph. And I remember one of the times talking about Father Joseph wearing the habit and basically telling Father, you're only doing this to draw attention to yourself. And which is not the truth. But I would say this. It's like it is to draw attention, but not to myself. It's to draw attention to Christ, to our Lord. And it's synonymous to the story of St. Francis in the way that, when he told the brother they're going to go out and preach, and they walked around, didn't say a word. Then they left to go back to their hut, and the brother said, I thought we were going to preach. And St. Francis said, we just did. So there is something to that. It does touch people. Right.
And there is also like the expectation, just how we carry ourselves. Because obviously I'm in a habit. I'm a sister. You're not going to see me dancing around to the music in the grocery store. I might hum a little bit, but depending on the song. Because there was right before Christmas. I was at the grocery store and I did hear a Christmas song, and I was patiently waiting for actual Christmas to listen to it, but I did get a little giddy and started and it was a hymn, a Christmas hymn. So but I didn't, I still kept my composure. You wouldn't have known that I was enjoying it. But it's also how we carry ourselves too. Like we above all can't be impatient. I recently was with someone, and something was taking some time, and the person was losing patience. And of course, I intervened and said, well, no, we can wait. We can wait. And the follow-up is to that is like, we have to set an example. People are expecting us to be what we say we are, followers of Christ. And getting upset or impatient is just really, and not saying that's easy, but And I'm not doing it because I'm better, but I also know I'm called to give an example more so.
You have a deeper, greater responsibility to do that.
Yes.
Than the rank and file Catholic.
Right. Just as if I were to intervene on someone else's behalf. It's amazing how braver, I guess, I've been since in the habit. People have only known me since I was Sister Catherine might not believe that I'm shy. But I've learned that I usually have to make the first move, put people at ease. Like that's on me because people just don't know. They don't know. And I mean, I definitely do have friends, people I talk to more than others and work with. I mean, I care deeply about everybody. Old friendships have obviously changed, but I've got a lot of new friendships, and it's been helpful for all of us. I mean, part of the reason why I started going down to Kentucky for the children's retreat is because they wanted the children to see a religious sister, because how are we going to get anyone to consider being a religious sister if they have never seen one, know what they're like, see that, she's happy, she seems pretty well adjusted, she doesn't seem like she's suffering, because I'm not. I mean, do I have my aches and pains, and do I get frustrated with myself or others? Of course. But those are all things I'm working on. But it's important to see that, on it. Right, but it's important to see that this is not like the worst thing that could happen to a child, whether it's religious sister or becoming a priest. The parents need to also see that this could be good for my child, because there's a generation that doesn't know, has no idea until now, which I also think is what's great about you also being down in Kentucky, a younger priest, and just sharing the real joy that we have. But also being realistic, we're not going to be like it's all roses, obviously, but no vocation is. But we all have that goal of wanting to get to heaven. So
there's always trials and tribulations, as they call it, the difficult days, and that comes with any area in your life.
Right.
God calls us to a vocation. He doesn't call us and tells us that it's going to be easy and a bed of roses all the time. But if you have obedience as your driving force, obedience to the will of God, and true obedience, of course, is coupled with humility and the love of God, that will take you a long way. And we just can't get discouraged on times of on those difficult days.
Absolutely.
Talked a bit about and when you took your we could call them solemn vows, but technically they're perpetual vows, right?
Yeah.
And you took that. Well, your anniversary's coming up, isn't it?
And just at this point of recording, it's 3 days away. It'll be 2 years. At first, I was like, "Is it 3?" No, it's only 2. Not because it feels so long, but I'm so confused with doing the calendar. I think it's 2024. I'm working on the planner. Yeah. It's just I'm out of my mind. But before I took to that point, after novitiate, there was the temporary vows for 3 years. So that was May of 2018. And this is when you came out with Father Bernard. Some people in Wisconsin are parents. And
I was a deacon at the time.
Right. It was just a few months before you were ordained. So I took 3 years of temporary vows. Now, as I told people, up until that point, those 3 years, up until really the morning of my solemn profession, I could have walked away and said, nope, I don't want this life. And it would have been okay. But now that I have made that solemn promise, that profession, the Franciscans are stuck with me for life.
Well,
so,
it kind of goes to what the second question was to be. And you basically answered it, but it's like, when did you know you wanted to enter in this life? I suppose it's not just when you were in the world, but also at what point while you were living in the religious life did you get the indication that yes, this is the life I wanna live.
Yes.
Or is there really any one event that you can think of?
There's definitely not any one event per se, and I know people like to know like the
what was that moment?
But none of us actually really know. No. And if America were to look back, there were a lot of moments that made you decide that this is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess like the plus side of being a bride of Christ, as the bishop puts, if there's a problem in that relationship, it's obviously me, because your spouse is God.
Well, so. I know I will always get along with my brother-in-law. And if there's an issue with my brother-in-law, it's me.
That's your problem. Yes.
It's my problem. He's also my employer.
Right. So... So there wasn't like any like aha like moment, but I could see over a few years like maybe some inklings of possibility. And I want to point out that it's not because I never seriously dated. I don't even think I could. I even unseriously dated, if you will. It's not that I couldn't, and I think that's an important thing that I had to realize is maybe this is why it took so long. I also had to realize that myself, that it's not because I couldn't find an earthly spouse, like there was something wrong with me, because the religious life is not a plan B option.
No, it's not.
It's like, oh well, I'm 30 or 25, 30. I don't
want to be the crazy cat lady,
so clearly maybe I'm supposed to be religious. It doesn't work that way.
Well,
I was just gonna say, just like the little girl or young woman that shows maternal instincts is the little mother hen, doesn't automatically mean she's going to be a mother, because I was the mother hen.
Yes, you were. And you were good at it.
And so just pointing out there, this is for parents. Just don't rule out either way with your children what it is. And I would also say so I've read things online. And mothers will openly admit they know we need priests, but they really want their children close at hand. And I understand that, but in the situation we're in, if yes, we need good Catholic families, but if we don't have the priests, especially, what kind of Catholic faith are you expecting to have? So, but I do think we're on a point where more people are open to it. We have a chance. There was always a chance, but I think we're actively trying to bring light to the religious life as a possibility. So, do you remember? Do you remember what you're gonna say before when I was still talking? I wasn't that you're being rude, but I just.
No. I guess I just kind of forgot about it because you're just talking about what we know. When you know is your haha moment,
right?
And how in the yes. But it's just how it is made up, all these little things. And I know what I was going to say to that. It's being your actual blood brother and growing up with you. And, I know that wasn't the case. I know it wasn't that. There was no interest of possible suitors, because there was interest. It's just you didn't have the interest. At least not so much as I don't know. I don't know why. And I'm not asking you to explain that aspect.
Well, what I will say to that is that I needed a lot of personal development. Like and I know, like, in the culture today, that, teenagers, middle schoolers have boyfriend, girlfriend. Like, there's a lot of dating going on, and I'm just, that baffles me. I mean, for a while, because it was so heavy in our teenage years and because I wasn't dating, I thought there was something wrong with me, and I got over that. Like, I saw the light that, because, what's the purpose of dating? Is it really to find someone really to spend the rest of your life with? What good is that in high school or middle school? And I'm sure people say, well, it's a little, it's not quite like that. Okay. But I needed, because I was so insecure, so shy, just had a lot of things that I needed to overcome that I just would not have been, I just wasn't right. If you don't like yourself, I had a lot of, like I said, I had a lot of personal work for it. But I also know that working through that was what also made the religious life possible. I mean, I know that a lot of people have said to me, it's like, oh, I always knew this of you, just for years now, and you kept putting it off. It's like, I'm pretty certain that when I moved to Rochester was the time God intended it. I realized I was older, but I just seen the development of my maturity, my knowledge. I needed to experience things in order to be where I am today. So
there's that. Also, more of a spiritual maturity, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, quite a bit, definitely. Because I mean, I kind of consider myself a bit of a revert. There was a period where you went to church on Sunday, like bare minimum. And then I was working, and sometimes I didn't, wasn't able to go on Sunday, and that does have its effects, even if you have to work and you can't help it. And then I just decided that I really want to take my faith seriously, and here we are. So, not saying that that's everybody. If you're going to be serious about religion, is to become a religious, but that was for me. I mean, and there were just other things that were kind of happening. I mean, there was someone who was very plain speak about the idea of religious life to me, and I'm very thankful to that person. Kind of got a ball rolling for me. But I remember the first time I ever visited Rochester was in 2001 when you were in minor seminary. And I didn't come back until, when Bishop Giles' consecration, but that was like a one-day thing.
That was kind of in and out situation.
Yeah, that wasn't
for
a
us.
visit. But I came in, 2012, but also 2013, I came out with some people from Wisconsin to bring some girls for school. And I got to actually sit in the car with someone my age that we've known each other for years, but not knowing each other. And that was good. But I spent time, we were here about a week, and I stayed with a family, got to know them. And I just felt like I like it here. Just New York, what New York is, but this little nugget of New York. And because I made this friendship, I came back out in December with you. Yeah. Visited, and the idea, I think it was then or January when we brought the same girls that we brought that summer back to school for the rest of the semester or school year. I think it was then that talking with my new friend, Jack, I don't know if she still listens to the podcast. I think sometimes, but anyway, she, because I worked from home at that time, she's like, well, why don't you come and stay with me for a few weeks? She's like, oh, it'll be okay with my husband. And it was, and I did. So I came out in end of May, and stayed at their house for 5 weeks. And I mean, the very next day, the first place I went was here, not the basement, but to, the chapel. And I remember emailing Bishop Giles a few weeks before, and I just said to him, I was like, I would really like to talk to you, but I'm not sure when I'll be ready. And the thing is, I had no idea what it was I wanted to talk to him about. And because I'm so great at articulating my thoughts, I've gotten better, but I'm a hot mess sometimes. I talk too fast. And he just wrote back, he'd be happy to talk with me whenever I'm ready. And he just said, and don't worry, I don't bite. It's like, good to know. And right away, though, after Mass, that very first day I was there, he, came out of the chapel, and I followed, and we went and sat underneath the magnolia tree. I said that funny, and just talked, just not anything specific, but just talked. And throughout those 5 weeks, I was obviously there and back. And there was one Sunday after Mass, I asked if I could talk to him. We're sitting, I'm crying, and I am a messy crier. I just like, and I was just, I didn't know how to articulate whatever was going on. I just didn't, I just didn't know. And at one point he asked me, do you ever see yourself getting married? And me with these big old tears in my eyes, just in a tissue to my nose, because like I said, I'm a messy crier. I just shook my head no. And it just left it at that. We just left it at that. But I left that, because that was shortly before I went back to Wisconsin. But I left from that with, just the idea of this really being what God is asking me to do.
Mm-hmm. Real possibility.
It truly felt like a possibility. I mean, there were some things like a couple years prior that were some up and downs, but we won't get into that. But it's just part of the journey. I'm not bitter or anything. It's all God's timing. But the thing is, how you handle letdowns is part of character development too. And so, shortly before I went to New York that summer, I had gotten a job offer, and they were willing to wait till I got back. So I already got this trip planned, and so when I got back from New York, I had this extra job, and I look back, I was like, God really had all the details worked out, because this extra job is what made it possible for me to clear up any debt I had before moving to New York. So it's kind of already like, yeah, I think this might be what I have to start thinking seriously about. And not long after I got back from Wisconsin, it was the Third Order Retreat, and I was a cord bearer, which cord bearers are invited to the retreat down in Kentucky. Well, they were only in Kentucky at that time, and I was, after all it was done that Sunday, Father Joseph did not have to leave right away, and I sat there talking with him, and it was then that it was kind of more evident that this is what God wants. Because I've talked to Father Joseph a lot over the years, and from that point on till I moved here, I probably talked to him at least once a month. I mean, obviously, and I've also talked to Father Bernard, but that's also part of, for discerning. It's not just like a glimmer of like, oh, this idea popped in my head, I'll pray on it for a day, a week. Oh, well, I don't think so, and that's it. That's not discerning. Discerning is really giving it some serious consideration, and the only way to really seriously consider it is, one, yes, prayer, but two, talking to your spiritual director, talking to your parish priest, talking to someone that knows a thing or two. I mean, if you have a trusted friend or family member, sure. I mean, you don't want to talk to your Protestant friend about the idea, because they're not likely to be too supportive. I may be wrong, but I kept it close to the vest. I mean, if you had been in town but you were in seminary, I probably would have talked to you. I talked to our brother James a lot too. But anyway, this job came to be. So I leave Kentucky with the idea of like, yes, this is what I'm working towards, and I just was. I spent a year. Was it a year? It was about a year working, getting that debt. It wasn't a lot of debt, but it was enough. But you need to be free of debt before you just be religious, because the order is not, that's can't bear that burden, or they shouldn't either. But I spent that year, and then when it came time to leave this job that I had, they're very good to me. I did what they hired me to do, and I wasn't going to leave until I found my replacement, and God provided that too, with like the perfect person for the job, which was a friend of mine. So you could see how he was working all of this. And I don't think it was like a delusion that God's doing what I want. I think it's just that he's showing that I need to try this. And that's what I'm going to say here is that this also was, I was at a point that no matter what, I still wasn't 100% sure that this was my vocation, but I knew that this is what I need to do to find out. I needed to go, move, and find out, live the life, because that's how you're going to know. You can't fully discern it without really trying to experience it.
Well, and not having an exaggerated confidence that this is my vocation. I'm absolutely 100% sure I'm going to give my entire life to God. Not having that does make you take the time to look at all these things lining up, saying, okay, this happened, this worked out. I had a benefactor come and help me here. I had someone come and help me here. I had this giant job line up here that helped me pay off my debt. I had this happen. Then you become more noticeable of these things. We're not saying that you don't want this to be a vocation. Not that you don't have an attraction to it to some degree, because you do, but you're also open to the idea that maybe this is not what God wants, but I have to see, I have to try. So by always having that not really the reservation, but we'll say the exaggerated confidence in oneself helps you to see and discern these things objectively. Like, okay, this happened, that happened. God always seems to make things work out. Does this mean this is what he wants me? This is the life he wants me to lead? It very well could be. Or is it just coincidence? Or perhaps the experience itself is to help me grow spiritually, even though it might not be my vocation.
Absolutely. But I mean, I wasn't going to be able to rule it out without giving it a fair try. And I know the common concern was, well, what if it doesn't work out? What about work? You're going to give up this job, And I said, I'm thoroughly convinced that if I truly try to discern what God's will is for me, and it is determined that I do not have a religious vocation, he will supply the job. He'll give me what I need.
Yes.
I mean, I have to have that faith. If I don't have that faith, then what am I doing at all? How can I call myself Catholic? So
God will help. God will help in that situation, and he just, the fact that you tried it, and that's the thing we tell a lot of young people, and just give God a fair try, and as long as you've done that, you don't have to come back in shame because you didn't fulfill a vocation. That's why you don't want to have a person going. You ask people knowing that you're going out to the religious life is one thing, but you talking about it and in a way that it's almost like you feel you're already a religious. That's not the thing to do. You have to. You ask people to pray, but you don't. You don't exaggerate. You don't go on and on about it. You keep a lot to yourself.
Me moving here was nothing. Like, I did nothing. So there wasn't anything to be super excited about. A lot of people didn't even know, at church, what I was doing. Most family did not know, because I really just wanted to go. And it wasn't that I was afraid someone was going to talk me out of it, but I also knew there were a lot of people just weren't going to understand it. But by the time those fall months rolled around, I was so ready to just give it all that I, at least try to give all I could to God in whatever way he wanted and however he was going to work that out. And, it for someone that likes to have details and to, be prepared, it was definitely, I wouldn't say it was an adjustment, but it was definitely different because obviously, I just knew
in its own right.
And sometimes we think humbly, it doesn't mean it's going to be embarrassing and mortifying in that sense. Like, oh boy, is my face right? I'll never live this down. But humbly, it's just is. It just is. But I just knew that because I had no idea what anything was going to look like. No idea when I moved out here. But I packed up some clothes, some books, computer, and Mom and Dad drove me out here. And before we headed this way, we went to visit you in the seminary in Lubbock.
Yeah.
Because we're like, we might not talk to each other ever again. We may never see each other. Which
that
it could have, for all I know.
That dream died.
It did.
Which what we actually, to bring that kind of humorous comment to a serious point, there is the separation from one's family normally that you have, and you don't just call up mom and dad whenever and feel how you're doing. There's usually a scheduled time, and usually around major holidays and feast days you're allowed to call, and you're not on the phone for hours and hours. 15, 20 minutes, usually what you're given. and you really have to have that separation from one's family.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had, some young people who have tried, who've come and said, I just don't know if I can, like be that separated from my family. I just don't know if I can do that. And some kind of think it's an exaggerated, because you take what our Lord said in Scripture about unless you hate your father, your mother, brother, sister, wife, or your very self, you cannot be my disciple. Our Lord didn't mean hate them or have nothing to do with them ever again. He means that your affection for them, your love for them, cannot be greater than your love for Him. That's the point he's driving. It's like using a hyperbole. Our Lord is just using this to bring His point across. And there is actually a lot to be said of having that separation, and it's spiritually liberating, because you are supposed to be separated from the world, and your family is one of those things. It's not how it was worked out in our situation so much, but
unfortunately,
we're both religious, and we work very closely together and doing a lot of the projects for children. And
neither one of us anticipated that.
No.
This was not something that we
No.
thought would happen. So we both came into our religious vocation without this being a possibility.
Yeah. You didn't come into it thinking that I'm going to be working with my siblings on various projects. So that's what happened. I didn't come into it thinking I was going to live with my father. That's what happened. It was the best thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think, for me, I didn't think I would end up, I knew it was a possibility, but I didn't want to end up in my home parish. I didn't want to end up here, but, I had to come, and I had to stay. I don't think the intention was for me to stay here as long as I did, but I had to. So, and now I'm in the situation I'm in, and you just deal with it. And it's not as difficult as what one could perceive or one could make it if they, overthink things. You just kind of got to go with it and have the conviction of your position, and not being a tyrant, but also not being a pushover.
Right.
So it's an adjustment, but ideally you would be away from those people you grew up with, those family and friends that you knew, because you want to maintain that ideal separation. But hey, you take with what God gives you, and He gives you the grace.
But, and also, I mean, now I didn't.
I don't hate it, by the way.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think it wasn't too difficult for me to necessarily more or less walk away from my home life, my family, friends. But I also wasn't like, well, I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm still your daughter. I'm still your friend. It's just that, and then Mom actually did take it pretty well. I mean, she, and that's also part of her spiritual development. I mean, is it going to be a sacrifice? Absolutely. It's going to be a sacrifice for your parents. It's going to be a sacrifice for you. It's going to be a sacrifice for some of your family members. Some might be happy to see you go. I'm not sure. But there's such a beautiful thing about sacrifice. Like, automatically I get to offer something up for and
right away.
Right. And I don't have to figure it out. I just have to day it one day at a time. And, you write home once a month. And I mean, it's, and I knew I had to do it. I mean, I was kind of like, what do I say? But I knew it meant a lot to Mom, because I remember when you used to write, and I'd be so excited to get your letter. So, and absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if anything, Mom might have liked me, Mom and Dad loved me, but it's just, you think you can't live without. And I know there's some families that are super close, but we are meant to make sacrifices. And if God's given you an obvious one, why not take it, knowing that if He's given it to you, which there's going to be graces to bear it. So, I mean,
and even if it was discovered that was not your vocation, God, that sacrifice that you made at that point in your life does not become null and void. It still means something for the mind of God. So it's not a loss.
No.
So,
and I mean, I was pretty sure. Even right before I was invested, I think the morning before, someone asked me how I was doing, and I teared up, and not because I was scared, but just like I just was excited for it. But I think that got a little bit misinterpreted. But I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't question and doubt. I mean, every time you might have screwed up saying divine office, got a word wrong, I was like, oh, that's a mark against me. I'm gonna get sent home, and that's an exaggeration on my part. There was nothing in Bishop Giles's corrections behavior that would have indicated that was a deal breaker. But me as a woman, you just kind of get a little crazy in the head. But like I said, now that I almost 2 years into my solemn profession, I'm a Franciscan for life. You can't really get rid of me. You might be able to send me somewhere else, but I don't know where that would be, logically speaking. So I've got plenty to keep me occupied here.
That kind of leads to like another point, because there's so many different things that you do. We know the normal things, the same, the office and following the schedule, but of all the different things that you get to do, what would you say is your favorite thing about Franciscan life? I suppose really that's more of a general question about the life itself. And then is there a specific job or task that you do regularly that you enjoy?
Wow. I mean, believe me when I say, and I hope you would think that I would not lie, but I really enjoy all of it. Every day is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm not just saying that to try to convince people to join it. This is truly sincere. I really do like the schedule, knowing specific times for prayer, mass most days of the week. I mean, that was something when I kind of started taking my faith more seriously. I had a dream, a wish, a prayer to be able to go to mass and communion for 7 days straight. And when the day I came to Rochester that morning, mass just so happened that was not going to be a weekend. His Excellency was traveling, so I was able to not only go 7 days in a row, but it was about 9, might have been 10. And sometimes we think God does not answer us, or we just kind of forget, or isn't quite what we imagine. Well, of course, this wasn't quite what I asked for. It was better than what I asked for, and the fact that I can go most days of the week is something I do not take for granted, because I know there are people that don't have that opportunity who would probably give everything they had to at least go to mass on a regular basis. And I think of those people especially when I'm able to go. But I do like the schedule. We have time for breakfast, time for lunch, time for dinner. It's all figured out. I enjoy the fact that I don't have to think about what I wear. It is nice, and I'm not saying that because I'm lazy, but there is an element of just like I can then focus on something else, something more important. And there just is a lot to do. I enjoy cleaning, probably more so as a religious. And there's an element of order in a religious house. I mean, obviously, if you were to look at the room I'm in with all of my different projects going on, it's organized chaos, I will say. But I know where stuff is. I mean, it's just Bishop Giles' office. He has because you're doing different things. We don't have a sister do this project and focus on this, and a sister do that, or there's not a brother to handle this. We've got a lot of balls to juggle.
Yep.
And that's just the reality. So I can't always completely finish something one day and I have to go back to it, but it's okay. The time goes fast, sometimes too fast, because I think it's 2024. I mean, it's almost Thursday. The week's halfway over. I mean, it's August. Didn't it just turn 2023? And I know that's actually a common as you get older, but it just blows my mind how just structure. I love the structure of the day, and I think we all love structure. I mean, we all need it. I mean, a friend of mine right now, her children are on summer break, and she's kind of counting down the days where they can start going back to school. because as hard as she tries to have structure during summer vacation, it gets a little harder at home, and you just need like that refreshing, but because we all crave it. I mean, we all. It sounds good to want to be your own boss, but no one's ever really like their own boss without someone to answer to or have some sort of responsibility like that. If you believe owning your own business is the greatest thing and you won't have to like answer anybody, you've been misguided. You've been lied to. So
always got to answer to somebody.
Exactly. So I just do appreciate that, knowing what needs to be done. And just the confidence it brings. So,
it's a wonderful thing when you have consistency, but also a little variety within what you have to do, developing the skills, even things you might not know that you could do, and it takes one out of their shell, and then also knowing you get to do it for the love of God and helping other people come closer to God, especially younger people. So that leads me to my final question for you on this.
We didn't talk what I like to do for funsies, but that's everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Because you wanted to know.
Well, your favorite thing about fun. Well, okay.
Well, outside the normal.
Well, what type of things you do outside of the norm? That's what you call funsies.
Well, I mean, I do make dresses for girls in need. I've got a few catechism classes, always working on something to engage the children. There is another project in the works, but I also have the YouTube channel Growing in Holiness with short videos that I am working on something for the 8 Beatitudes. Hopefully I'll have that out in September, early September. I have a lot of ideas, just not a lot of time to get it all done. And, when you're one sister, it's kind of, and you still have to eat and keep the house clean and take care. And I love taking care. I love being sacristan, making sure the chapel's in order. I just recently made a ciborium veil that didn't look too bad. My next one will be better. But, just having a chance to try stuff. Learn from it, and Bishop Giles has been a very good influence on basically stifling the perfectionist in me, because I was such a perfectionist I wouldn't do anything because I was afraid to make a mistake, and there's no room for that in the religious life. You do or do not. There is no try. Oh wait, but that applies here. And he's always been encouraging just to just try it out, see what happens. What's the worst thing that could really happen, right? So it's made me more confident. And I mean, I've been here now almost 8 years, which seems unreal. It seems absolutely unreal. But then I look at it, when I left, I had, a 2-year-old nephew, just like a 10-year-old nephew, and now he's almost 19. It's just, or my friend's children who just before I came had triplets. I only knew them for about a couple months of their lives, and now they're 8 years old. It's just, and they're just whole different people, and and it's just amazing how this is all working out. So.
Well, it's certainly not a boring life, and that's the thing that I think that can deter young people, or really anyone, from the life, because they have misconceptions of it.
Well, oftentimes, whatever they see portrayed are, sisters in chapel praying. Now, I will add that there are different orders of sisters. I mean, I'm a third order regular, which means I have the active life and the contemplative life. I'm not cloistered. That would be Poor Clare's. Now, Poor Clare would not leave the convent, except for the exception of a medical emergency.
Or a doctor's appointment that you have to leave.
I should say, yeah.
They're not emergency necessarily, but...
I mean, had I been a Poor Clare when our mother died, I wouldn't have been able to go to her funeral. Now, when you have those cloistered sisters, they do have what they call an extern sister, which would be a third order sister. And, she does the one dealing with the public, doing the shopping, and there might be, depending on how big the religious house is, there may be two of them. If possible, that one of those sisters would have gone in my place. But in order for us to have a cloister situation, we need at least, I believe it's at least 4 professed sisters, and we're not there. So,
Yeah.
So I am a third order regular, which means I have time for prayer, and of course, and that's not to say the sisters are cloistered aren't active, but they just aren't going out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're active in, behind the scenes more. They might sew vestments, and you'll see the vestments, but you're not going to see the sister that made them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've gotten used to going out in public.
Mm-hmm.
I feel up to me, I wouldn't leave the property. I'm pretty, but you have to sometimes. But I've encountered a lot of nice people. I don't think I've ever actually encountered anyone outright rude. Although I remember shortly after I was invested, right before Christmas, one of the bell ringers saw me and she stopped me and she's like, so young to make such a decision. And I was like, I'm going to be 35 my next birthday. I know I look kind of young, but I'm not. But also I'm going through the process to make sure this is what God wants.
So young to make such a decision. These are the same people who think that a couple getting married in their early 20s have made but they're too young to make the decision. And
but yet, or not that I know we don't talk about heavy stuff, but yet those are the people that have no problem with a child wanting to change genders at whatever adolescent age they are. So,
but they think this is a big, tough decision, a big decision, and one that requires age. Age doesn't equal wisdom, folks. It doesn't. It doesn't.
So, but anyway, I'm happy. I'm very happy. I am so glad for this life. I really am hoping that we will get some young women that will answer God's call, because he knows who he wants to be religious. Yep. We just need to help guide those to make that leap, to make that decision and know that it's a good one. It's a good life. It's a great life. And we get to do fun things too. It's not all work and play, or I'm sorry, it's not all work. There is some play. Yeah. But see, I enjoy everything so much that
where there is love, there is no burden.
Right.
Where there's joy, there is no burden. And I suppose you're already answering the final question, which is, what would you tell any young girl who is showing an interest? What would you tell them about the religious life? Or encouraging words or anything?
Well, definitely don't expect there to be like this bolt of lightning. Aha, this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
It really, we're better off with the little doses of considering the possibility, but also truly discern it. Take time. Like I said earlier, discerning is not praying about it for a day or a week or even 6 months, a year. That's not truly discerning a vocation. That's basically killing time to say no, I guess. Now, if you really feel like repulsed by religious life, but see, that's interesting. Maybe it's not for you, but I would definitely, if you're feeling repulsed by it, scared, you should talk to someone about it. Because very well, we all know Satan's trying to keep us from heaven. He's trying to destroy all these things. So don't try to find a way to qualify it yourself.
And there's also the aspect that you should be a little scared. You should have that within you where it's like you're excited, but you're scared. You're just, because you're going into the unknown. You're not really sure how this is going to end up. But that's where we put in our confidence in God, saying, Lord, if this is your will for me, I want to embrace it 100%. I want to give myself to you. But if this is not your will for me, if this is not my vocation, I still want to give myself 100% to you. But you will show me the way, Lord. But I am compelled, for whatever reason, to enter, to give this a fair try. And that's what God is asking for. For in that moment, he'll ask for more later on. If this is your vocation, he's going to ask for more. But in that moment, he's asking, give this a try. Do not, even if you feel you're repulsed by it, sometimes you have that person who's a passion. No, this is not the life for me. I don't want it. You find kind of later on, maybe they grow a little older and wiser. They start to see that, oh, perhaps I protested too much. And this is what God wanted.
I probably uttered those things too, but it came from a place where I was struggling mentally because I read something not too long ago. I mean, before I came here, maybe around then. But the idea of only the ugly girls are meant to be religious. The pretty ones, it's a weird mentality that people have out there, but they think religious life is meant for those homely girls. And I'm a homely girl. I know it. And so I struggled with that, though, when people might have said, well, what about this? I think, well, yeah, see, because you think I'm ugly, I won't be able to get married. I mean, and I realized that was immaturity on my part, but at the same time, that's something I had to work through.
But that was the actual honest thought that was happening. And
right.
it's like dealing with a little child who finds that getting this toy at this time, they want to make sure that toy is safe, is important to them. It's not important in the grand scheme of life, but it's important to them. Mm-hmm. So even if the person feeling this way, you'd be like, well, it's a silly thought. Why are you having that thought? But it's a serious obstacle that they have to overcome, mm-hmm. whether it is exaggerated by the imagination or not. That's not the point. When you deal with things of a spiritual nature, they often can appear exaggerated. But that's where our trust in God really has to evolve, and that we can see past these superficial insecurities that we have, such mm-hmm. as this idea of holiness. The devil doesn't care how he deters you. He doesn't care how it happens. He'll put any thought in your head.
It's a father of lies.
He's a father of lies.
I mean, I am homely, but that's beside the point.
To beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sister, and the physical beauty fades, but the spiritual beauty is what can really blossom and grow, and that's what we're always looking for. And that's just so very important. If you feel the call, whether we're talking about a young man becoming a priest, maybe a religious brother, or a young woman entering into the convent, becoming a sister, if you feel drawn to it in one way or the other, do not dismiss it as just a flight of fancy. Give it the proper time and the proper investigation for yourself. Mm-hmm. You
owe it to yourself to go about it properly. You really do. Because you don't want to. Well, you definitely don't want to say no to God, at least not intentionally.
And having that in the situation where you actually talk to a priest, you talk to your mother and your father about it. These are things that, like I'm seriously considering religious life. What are your thoughts? What do you think about it? And anyone who is smart will say possibly, oh yes, I could see that for you. It's possible. I could see that for you, but they never want to feel like they're pressuring you one way or the other. Yep. And that is very important. You never want anyone to feel like they were pressured into this life. Most people don't have that intention to do it, mm-hmm. but they come on so strong and so eager and so excited that, oh, this young individual, this is showing his interest. Oh, we got to clamp down on this. You got to be careful not to go too hard, because you could overwhelm and get them scared. You might lose a vocation.
Right. And I will say Bishop Giles was honestly, I had no idea what he was thinking per se. I mean, right before I came, I was like, is he even really expecting me? I mean, does he know what to do with me when I get there? And he told me later on that, it said until you actually came, I wasn't really going, he obviously he had a plan,
Yeah.
but he's been let down before. It's like until you are physically here, I wasn't really going to react.
Wasn't going to invest so much
Right.
time and yes, emotion.
Right.
Because you're amazed at how much a superior invests themselves in the development of the young religious, and it's not a maternal paternal relationship as we know it in the world. It transcends beyond that. Yes, you care for them, but it's comes from a different source. Well, not a same source, but just from it's applied differently, I should say. Mm-hmm. But you're giving yourself to them, and you want to see what's best for. You want what's best for them, and see that they do everything that they can to make this vocation work.
And it very well may be what's best for them is not a religious vocation, and that is okay. But as you brought up, you have to. I don't know if it was probably an old episode, but you have to give it a reasonable try too. Like coming out for, like 2 weeks, like, oh, I don't know, is not really giving it a try. No. And there may be some things like your superior might be able to pick up on, because as you are watching, seeing how they're adjusting, seeing what, way to guide them. And, you definitely don't want to say yes to someone who doesn't. That's something that we have to consider too. But I will also add, just for anyone that, young women who might be considering the religious life, one advantage they do have that I did not have is that they could write to me. So you're welcome to do so with any questions you might have. And we can go from there. Because I do spend some time with children, and it's been encouraging that children aren't afraid of me, at least not most of them. So I try to be firm but kind, or kind but firm, whatever order you want to put that in. I am a little bit of a pushover, so that's something I personally need to work on. But anyway,
sister, I thank you for taking the time to answer these questions. This is something we were planning on doing for a while, and I just think it's very good just to get your perspective on this, and I think it's helpful to just hear from your experiences. And there's always little tidbits in any of the podcasts we do from our experiences in our life as religious. So it means a lot, and it's part of who we are. So you're always going to see some aspect of it, and of course we really want to promote these things. And one of the things we do promote, people sending in questions, and we have somebody ask about 5 or 6 questions. We're good, and already, since we've taken quite a bit of time here, we're going to answer 2 of them. We went over these questions before recording, and we're going to answer. Okay, there are 5 questions. We're going to answer 1 and 3, mostly because it shouldn't take us too long, and
it kind of fits into this.
It fits in this episode very, very, very much. So the first question sent to us by Alexandra is, what is it like being brother and sister and sharing the religious vocation in the same order?
When I first read that question, I didn't really think about it, because it's just one of those things like, yes, you are my brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that it's kind of something that people, I guess, marvel at, that there are 2 religious vocations within our family. And I wouldn't say it's been at all tempting to think like we're better because of it. To me, it just is it's what it is. We both were called to the religious life, and we're both fulfilling that call. And, I know when you went to Wisconsin before you were ordained, and I talking with our brother, it was just treating you really as what you're supposed to. Yes, you're our brother, you're your mom and dad's son, but you're going to be a priest, and you are a priest, and that's what you are first and foremost.
Yeah.
And you obviously aren't going to play favorites, and we're not going to treat you, well, you are special, but special in the reverence that's due to you as an alter Christus. So, and that's very important to us. And, but I guess we said earlier, I didn't anticipate we'd be working in the way that we have been.
Well, and then to that, I mean, one thing I do appreciate about our family is that understanding of that respect and the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And even with you and I, there are certain boundaries that we still have with each other. But what is it like? It's interesting. It's interesting. It is enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
It is thrilling to know that I'm praying for my sister, whom I've had a very close relationship with when we were in our young adults. You and I were very close to one another, and the best relationship I ever had with anybody is with my sister, and it became deeper when we both took vows.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing it, and it was that also having family members being third order secular.
Mm-hmm.
United us even more to one another in the
Right.
Franciscan family.
Right.
But when you have one who has also taken this step, you're someone who can relate to you,
Right.
that you know and you trust.
Right. I mean, and it's not uncommon for a priest to write to sisters for, well, prayers, but also get their advice and vice versa. So, I mean, I bounced a whole bunch of ideas onto you, because sometimes I'm not very good at simplifying, but I will, and it's interesting, like you mentioned the boundaries, because I remember when my first visits back to Wisconsin, because I can't remember, it's something I said to people. I think I told someone I had to ask your permission for something because you are my superior, and someone's like, well, that must be really weird and difficult. I was like, no. I mean, it's the right thing to do. That's what I'm called to do, and I also know that you're not going to obedience, especially holy obedience, is not something that's done arbitrarily.
You don't abuse it,
right?
Yeah.
I don't abuse what I asked for, and yes, you could say no, but you also figure I'm asking because it's a need.
Well, and it's also like asking your younger brother. And I said, well, no, I mean, it's naturally speaking, you're my older sister, but religiously speaking, I am your older brother because I've been in the religious life longer than you.
Yes.
So
Sister Catherine's only 8 years old. No, 7 years old. 7.5.
And I'm 12.
Exactly. So mature are we?
I'm almost a teenager in religious life. But no, it's.
I'm just at the age of reason.
I think. So when you're doing wrong.
Yes.
But no, it is. It does make it more thrilling, and I think because we are blood related, it makes this podcast possible. I don't think would have been able to do it with any other sister, because generally speaking, the brothers and the sisters don't talk to each other a lot. We don't congregate with each other. It's not done. The situation we're in, there's certain allowances for it, but that I already have this. This is my sister.
Right.
And it was one of the things I always loved when we've been out together. People say, this is my sister. Oh, no, this is my sister. She is my sister. And yeah, this is father, brother. Oh, yep. Really? This, yeah, we are. It's like I remember one lady walking out of an Aldi's together. You two must be going to a costume party.
Yes.
They're like, no.
Actually
No, actually
not.
not.
we don't mock the people that ask that, because it's just, I get it. Some people, especially because we were all together around Halloween too. So, but we were just like, no, we're actually, this is a real deal.
Some people are thrilled when they find out you're really a priest or sister. And you're then they start asking you these questions, and you pull out the business card and hand it to them, and
you never know what will come of that. You may not see something right away, but you know, because of the habit, someone's thought about God that might not have, and it's not. I'm wearing the habit, but it says nothing that I'm doing, but it's a symbol of my dedication to God that is doing that. So, and I'm glad for that opportunity.
And I'm glad in that we get to share. So there are aspects, and there's a certain amount of pride.
Sure.
That holy pride that you can have. Right. When to be there, to be ordained a priest and to have your sister there, in her habit, being a part of that meant a lot.
And there's also that nice feeling of being around your own kind. Like whenever I go places by myself or travel by myself, it's always better when you have your own kind. Or when you sit around a table. When we were in Kentucky and we're at the Friary. His Excellency, you, Brother Pascal, we're all sitting there. It felt nice because we don't get
to do that as very often, and it's just to have the conversations. It's so nice.
That's part of the sacrifice we have to make, but
I can be that way with you. A little bit more relaxed, I suppose. I can be with you than with any other sister. Mm-hmm. And by relaxed doesn't mean to going out of boundaries, but it's just. I'm able to consult with you a little more easily.
And I'm probably more comfortable with maybe calling you out, not that you necessarily saying something wrong, but that idea. I'm not sure how that sounds, Father. So let's talk about it.
Which helps with what we do here.
Right.
And I will just add one final point to that. It also added to my joy to be taking part when you made your solemn profession.
Yes, as hot as that day was, it was still a wonderful day.
It was so hot that the red from the book cover, actually parts of the book cover, stuck to my hand. I ripped it off. My hand was all full of parts of this old book cover that my sweat just attached to it. It was a wonderful experience.
I firmly believe that those who came and suffered with us are going to be blessed for that, taking consideration. I mean, it really was, as hot as it was, I was very grateful of the people that came. There are people that came from Wisconsin, down from Kentucky.
To be there unless God said no.
Right. But it just meant a lot because that was like the first time really in my life that something was about me, and I don't mean that like selfishly, but this was something I get to do. I mean, as someone who's been to many weddings and supporting people in that way, and one of my friends even said to me, he's like, well, you were there at my wedding, and I felt I should be here for this, and I thought it was great. I appreciated that consideration because you generally, especially when you're the single one, and you just kind of get least consideration, I guess. Not always, but it's not. I don't say it's intentional, but
I know what you mean.
I think I understand married people like to be around other married people so they can, share their ups and downs, and they don't think we can understand.
Religious like to be around other religious.
Exactly. I mean, as much as I enjoy being around, especially when I go down to Kentucky and Brother Jacoba, as we call her. I mean, but I talked to her outside of that. She's very helpful to me. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things without her. So God gives us people too. So that's helped a lot too.
God bless her.
Yes.
And
she knows.
God bless the situation. She knows who she is.
We probably wouldn't have done this podcast if it had been for her nudging the idea.
Probably. Well, the third question to this, we'll get to that, is the final thing we'll talk about, and I think it's very appropriate, is what is each of your favorite St. Francis quotes?
Oh, it did say St. Francis quotes. Okay, I did read that correctly.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I've got one. Would you like me to
Alright.
go first?
You go
Or should you?
first.
Okay. Age before beauty. I get it. All right. Anyway, my favorite quote is, "It was easy to love God and all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things." And it's just how true. I mean, it's, we're more drawn, we're definitely kinder to those that are appealing, physically, visually, but trying to see, it just reminds me to see the good in everyone. Everyone was made in the image and likeness of God, despite of like some decisions they made. I mean, I know I didn't always make good decisions either. It's not up to me to condemn. I mean, it is up to me to correct and try to guide properly, but also just remember that God loves us all. He wants us all, and I am called to do what I can to help myself. Because I know by helping others, I'm also growing with a deeper love and wanting to know and to also know and love and serve Him. And I'm just grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah.
And he popped.
What I take,
Hopefully we heard it.
what I take from that quote is also very much in that vein. Also look at how when things appear to be going well, when we're all showered with the blessings, it's so easy to love God when we're beholding what we consider beautiful, and even just the situation, spiritually, the sweetness we have from the consolations. But when the trials come, and for St. Francis, he had some serious ones, such as the illness, imprisonment. These were all things that helped them see beyond just the beauty, even the beauty in nature itself, but then seeing the beauty in the Creator. And even in his trials, God was always there. That's where I see a very good beauty in that statement. And also I have two. But if I had to pick one of them, it would be St. Francis advising us that begin by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and soon you'll find yourself doing what is impossible. So we begin by following the commandments of God and His Holy Church, doing the basics in our spiritual life, doing what we know we are supposed to do for the love of God. We have to have that foundation. It has to be there. We can't soar with the seraphim until we are ready to climb up the mountain with the creatures.
Well, realistically, if you're going to climb a mountain, there's training involved. You just don't go from zero to. There's conditioning, and that's how our faith is too. Yourself. And because what I was thinking about when you said that, because often we want to just do like the big things. Maybe you're feeling very psyched up about your faith, and you just want to go big, but being faithful in those little things is what's really going to make a difference. And we know that's true in worldly endeavors
as well. And then you'll start doing what is possible. And extra prayers that you weren't saying before. Patience with people you would have had patience with before. Acts of charity that you never had the time for, you find you do. And then you'll find yourself doing something that is impossible, which for us is impossible, but for God it is very possible, and that is achieving the unification of your will with God. That is finding sainthood in this life. That is impossible for us, but so possible for the grace of God. And we just have to trust in His grace.
Right.
And
don't get in His way.
Don't get in His way.
We can do all things in Him who strengthens us.
It's so true. Yeah. So this is where, and for us as Franciscans, we're called to embrace that ideal in the spirit of St. Francis, in the love of Christ crucified. And this is what we look to encourage and to inspire. And we hope that this podcast has inspired those who are thinking, or those who have children who they want to inspire to possibly answer the call of God. And if you have any questions, as Sister said, you can write to her. You can write to Aim Higher. You can, get a hold of me through Aim Higher and ask these questions. And we'll be happy to help you through it, because this is part of our vocation to help you in your vocation, all for the love of God. Deo gratias.
Deo gratias.